And now we are going to have a very important guest, a wonderful guest, so Dr. Mc Namara.
E un bel applauso anche per lui.
So please clap your hands for him.
Siete versando.
Di già.
Falso ragazzone, vedete, qui parliamo di ringiovanimento. Il dottor Mc Namara è un medico specialista in radiologia. Lui è stato il primo che 25 anni fa ha portato in Europa la risonanza magnetica. È un esperto di medicina preventiva e ci parlerà, è una persona, lui mi ha detto, è simpaticissimo, è bravissimo, e lui mi ha detto che per la prima volta lui farà una presentazione speciale solo per noi. Lui lavora in una clinica importante di Monte Carlo per la medicina preventiva, giusto Michael?
Yes.
Okay. E ha detto che ci dedicherà qualcosa di molto speciale. Lui parlerà di idrossitirosolo, ovvero di una sostanza particolare, meravigliosa, che è stata scoperta e che è contenuta nell'olio d'oliva, e quindi noi con la nostra dieta mediterranea possiamo usufruire ogni giorno. Okay? Lascio la parola al dottor Mc Namara, godetevelo perché è uno spettacolo. Prego.
Thank you. Oh, yes, thank you. Great. Yes, yeah, very good. Thank you, Lorena. And thank you for your kind presence today. I'm very pleased and honored to be speaking to you about a subject that is very close to my heart, and you're going to see why. It's something that I've been working on for the better part of the past 7 years. Although I've been practicing preventive medicine, and I'll give you a bit of my history for the past 32 years. I found this subject to be something very compelling, very appropriate for today, especially for the current condition of the world's health situation, the current disease situation of the world. I think that this is something you're going to find to be very appropriate and probably relates to most of us in this room for other reasons that I'm going to talk about. Now, as a doctor, medical doctor, we are always intrigued, especially with the age of the internet, by the advent of medical information that becomes more democratically available to all of us, to the masses. Many doctors don't like this. Actually, I welcome it. I welcome this because I get more questions. I get more queries about different treatments, about people making self-diagnoses. I think we're all guilty of that. Even myself as a professor of medicine, we all become guilty more or less of going on the internet when we get a little back pain or neck pain or a headache or certain symptoms, and we obviously have access to instant answers. And unlike most doctors, who many of my colleagues seem to be put off by this, I like this very much because this is something that raises a lot of interesting questions, and I'm actually learning from this process. But despite all the questions and clients and patients who come forth asking me about their specific symptoms and their specific needs and curiosities, one thing I've noticed is not one single person has ever inquired about polyphenols from olives, which I think is very interesting, especially given the fact that during the next hour or so, I'm going to relate to you a compendium of information that I put together about something that I'm working with, as I mentioned, very closely myself. I get asked about antioxidants in general. We all know what antioxidants are. I'm going to expand upon this. We all get asked about vitamins, about nutrients, about hormones, but nobody's asking about olive polyphenols, which I find very interesting because olive tree is something very, very special. As you see here, olive trees can live to and beyond the age of 2,000 years. Why is that? Well, it turns out that during the past 8,000 years of cultivation by mankind, olives have developed a very special property. They've developed defense against disease. They don't die. They don't get infection. They don't get cancer, of course, but they have strengthened themselves to live to be 2 centuries or 20 centuries old, and they don't get disease. And that's due to a special class of molecule called a polyphenol. So you're going to learn in the next hour or so, for those of you who don't know, what is a polyphenol? What are the classes of polyphenols? Why does the olive tree live longer? Because what prevents the olive tree from getting disease, from getting infection, is the same polyphenol that gets imparted into the fruit, the olive fruit, into the leaves, partaken by humans, and thereby has created a situation where we also can be resistant to disease. Now, the olive has long been recognized for its health benefits. This is the logo of the leading global health institution, the World Health Organization. And as you can see here, what do we see on the logo of the WHO? Olive branches. I'm sorry for you olive lovers. I know, wine lovers. I know that you would have much rather see grapes and grapevines on this WHO logo. While wine is positive for health, it's not as good as the olive, and that's why we see the olive in the emblem of the WHO. So before I proceed, just 2 words about myself so you know where I'm coming from. I studied medicine in the United States at the University of Michigan, whereupon I then took an internship in general surgery. So I've got licensed in surgery in San Diego, California. Then I became, as Lorena mentioned, a radiologist, and I was actually a pioneer in MRI scanning, magnetic resonance imaging. I actually opened the very first MRI department in the Princess Grace Hospital of Monaco back in 1986. So I have a lot of experience, about 110,000 patients worth of diagnoses. So I spent all of my life diagnosing, but moreover, I was never interested in doing what I call damage control medicine, where patients get sick, they come to see us, and then we try to find a solution. What we're doing is, the current model of medicine is we chase after disease. And while that has its benefits, and of course we cannot escape the model because that's the current global model, I'm more interested in being proactive to prevent disease. So I then opened up a series of clinics to do preventive total body scans using MRI and in some cases computed tomography, CT. We do a preventive total body scan with a detailed measure of biomarkers to do a detailed checkup of an individual in order to know really what their status is. Do they really have a risk for heart attack? Do they really have a risk for cancer? And then we can implement preventive measures, which you will see led me to the pathway of developing natural products, but natural products with scientific backing, and that's what took me to the world of polyphenols. So you probably have all heard of the Mediterranean diet. Mediterranean diet was published in 1998 for the first time in a very important landmark study, and what they determined was that the Mediterranean diet decreases the rate of heart attack, decreases the rate of cancer, it prevents death. All things being considered equal, people living in the Mediterranean areas, for some reason, lived longer. They could smoke, they could drink, they could be obese, they could be inactive, but compared to a cohort of people living in Asia, South America, North America, they lived longer. And after detailed research as to what causes the Mediterranean diet, what did we find? We found out that it's due to a special molecule in the olive oil. In fact, first we found out it was due to olive oil in particular, and that's what made people live longer. Of course, there are fruits, there are nuts, there's fish, but it turned out that the chief component of the Mediterranean diet is olive oil, and then further research separated the components of olive oil. First we thought it was the fats, the fatty molecules, then we saw that other fatty oils didn't have that same risk prevention, and it was actually the polyphenols. And when you look upon the history of great thinkers, because I'm a great follower of great thinkers, Albert Einstein, for example, we know him for winning the Nobel Prize, not for relativity, but for the dual nature of light as a particle and a wave. He also was a vegetarian. Did you know that? A staunch vegetarian. And he was a great believer in the true method before it was even described as the Mediterranean diet. The man who made the screening of this video, or the slides that you see here, the light projected on this is Thomas Edison. And Thomas Edison was a great inventor. He was also a vegetarian. And I just point out that these people recognize the true value already of prevention and what we can do to actually proactively live longer. So I'm going to talk, as you know, about olive polyphenols. I'm going to tell you what an olive polyphenol is, what are the various polyphenols that exist today in extra virgin olive oil and in extracts of olives that are actually even more potent and more strong than extra virgin olive oil. The Mediterranean diet is based on the fact, as I mentioned, that we consume a regular amount of extra virgin olive oil. But we're going to take that further. Talking about all of these diseases, it's an exhaustive list. It's almost one of these scenarios where it's too good to be true, but it's the reality of the situation. And it's all based on this molecule. This is hydroxytyrosol. We don't have to be chemists. I won't go into the details, but I would like to point out the key feature is this ring of 6 carbons. And to this ring of 6 carbons, there's another carbon chain, but there are these oxygen and hydrogen groups. They're called hydroxyl groups, these two right here. And this is what gives this molecule its particular power to prevent disease. So this is hydroxytyrosol. I'll show you the other ones in just a moment. I would like to first point out, before going any further, on a scientific basis, that the only medicine that I practice and believe in is what I call evidence-based medicine. If it's not published in a peer-reviewed journal, I won't talk about it. So everything you see today is published. It's regularly available online. For those of you who would like references to some of the studies that I'm going to show you, I'm very much available afterward. I'll show you some of these titles and papers during this talk. But it's very important that everything is scientifically documented. The 3 key polyphenols that I'm going to talk about today, number 1, as you know, hydroxytyrosol. It's what I call the king of polyphenols. It's the strongest polyphenol in reference to its ability as an antioxidant, as an anti-inflammatory agent, as an anti-disease agent. The other 2 that I really like and are very prevalent in extra virgin olive oil and even more prevalent in aqueous extracts of olives is oleopurine. Oleopurine is the most common most abundant, let's say, polyphenol that you find in olive leaves. It's also anti-inflammatory. It also has anti-cancer value. It's very common as I mentioned, the olive leaf. And in the olive itself, during the maturation process, this actually divides into 2 molecules, and one of its byproducts, its derivatives, is hydroxytyrosol. So that's a very important relationship. Oleocanthal is another very important, particularly in the world of cancer prevention, the third very important polyphenol that's found in extra virgin olive oil. Here you see the structures. We don't have to go into the chemistry in detail, but I just would like to point out, again, hydroxytyrosol, oleocanthal, and oleopurine. What they share in common is these carbon rings. In fact, a polyphenol is just a multiple phenolic molecular structure. So the 6 carbon ring with these hydroxyl groups, oxygen and hydrogen, is called a phenolic acid, phenol. And when you have multiple, such as this case with oleopurine, several phenolic groups, it's a polyphenol. You can have others, such as resveratrol you find in wine. Many polyphenols exist in nature, in plants and fruits and vegetables. They sometimes contain many multiple phenolic rings. In our case, we only have 1 and 2 in oleocanthal, oleopurine, and hydroxytyrosol. Another key point that I would like to elucidate is the toxicity profile of polyphenols from olives. It's a very important subject. It's been studied. I think very few of you here would have an intolerance to extra virgin olive oil. I mean, it's part of our diet. We cook with it, especially in Italy. It's the most wonderful place in the world to find the best olive oil and the best dishes served with olive oil. And nobody's, to my knowledge to this date, I haven't never seen a patient who's been allergic to olives, allergic to olive oil, has an intolerance to olive oil, gastrointestinal distress. I'm sure it happens. It could be very rare, but what we do know is the toxicity profile is extremely safe. 2,000 milligrams per kilogram of polyphenol is the studied toxicity rate. This is the equivalent of about 1,000 bottles per day of extra virgin olive oil. So I think we're all fairly safe in that matter. So what happens when we take olives, the harvest is going on right now, and we press these olives, what happens? We get olive oil. Olive oil comes out of the first press, and 2% of these magical polyphenol molecules go into the extra virgin olive oil. And despite only 2%, that is responsible for the Mediterranean diet, for living longer, less cancer, less heart disease. 55 or 54% roughly of the polyphenol goes into the water that's pressed at the same time out of the olive fruit, and that's discarded. It's olive mill wastewater. It's thrown away. But more than 25% higher phenolic content, and it's thrown away until now. And that's when, as I mentioned, over 5, 6, 7 years ago, I got interested in this subject, started working with a group to recover this olive mill wastewater, and to develop into an actual product that we could do research with, and perhaps even go further to make this commercially viable so that people can benefit on a greater level from the Mediterranean diet, but rather than having to drink a certain amount of extra virgin olive oil per day, because how much extra virgin olive oil can one drink? Let's put it into an aqueous solution, and that's why we came to this conclusion. So we still, in the research I'm conducting now, we still give this product in aqueous form. We could dry it, we could make it into a powder, we could add it to food, we could put it in a capsule, but we don't. Why? Because as you see here, we have a 5-fold improvement, 500% improvement in the absorption, the bioavailability. That's a very important subject. What is the bioavailability of oleic phenolic compounds? It's extremely high. We've given this to patients who drink it, and then we measure blood tests to determine the actual polyphenol content in the blood serum, and it's extremely high, it's extremely rapid, 5 times more rapid with the liquid than with the capsule. And the peak that we reach, the peak blood level, is also 35% faster in the case of hydroxytyrosol. Therefore, we chose to stay with the liquid product. Now, in taking this further, myself as a preventive medical doctor, I asked myself, who would be interested? Who would actually, if we could develop such an aqueous product? Again, this is not olive extract, this is a aqueous extract. It's olive water, and it's concentrated. Well, basically, as you're going to see in the next 45 minutes or so, anybody that would like to live longer, because the diseases affected are the most common ones on the planet, would be a candidate to at least consider taking this as a supplement. So the mechanisms are very simple to understand. They go into great detail. I will try to avoid the detail during this talk, but I will talk to you about some really important subjects. For example, you've all heard about antioxidants. Many of us are concerned about getting more antioxidants into our system, and for good reason, because the existence of these special molecules called free radicals can be deleterious to our health. And we need to get rid of these free radicals if they accumulate in great quantities, and that happens with antioxidants. One of the greatest problems in health today, probably the greatest health problem in the world, and certainly in this room, is the case of chronic body inflammation. And I'm going to tell you more about that shortly, but the antioxidant and anti-inflammatory effects are, for me, the 2 most important effects, as well as everything else listed on this slide. So inflammation, what is inflammation? Well, inflammation, if you go lay in the sun in the Caribbean today, your skin's going to get red. That's inflammation. But that's a good inflammation, because the redness is, because the ultraviolet has hurt us, that redness is trying to eliminate the damage, get rid of the damaged cells, the epidermis, slough them off, and make new ones. If you are cooking and you touch a hot pan and your hand gets red, that's inflammation. That's a good inflammation, believe it or not, because that's going to get rid of the damaged cells that you've produced by touching the hot pan on the stove. So these are good cases of inflammation. But the inflammation I'm talking about is the one that at least 50% of you in the audience have right now, 50% of us, I should say, because we're all in this together, minimum 50%, and it's killing us every second, every moment of the day, 24 hours a day. That's the inflammation. It doesn't cause fever, but it does cause disease, and that's what I'm going to talk about.
Ogni malattia che è qui nello in modo particolare.
Alzheimer's, diabetes, these are all inflammatory diseases. So what about inflammation? Because we can give extra virgin olive oil. We can give polyphenols in the form of aqueous extract. But can we measure the effect of it on inflammation? Because it's no good if we can't measure it, and we can. We have biomarkers of inflammation. For example, TNF alpha, which is a cytokine. It's a special molecule, a hallmark of inflammation. And in fact, if we give hydroxytyrosol in combination with other polyphenols from olives, because the HT alone doesn't seem to work, it actually reduces the TNF alpha. We can measure this in a blood test. By the way, this was compared first with resveratrol. Resveratrol is a very potent antioxidant that we find in red wine, for example, and in grapes and other fruits. And the profile, the relationship between the hydroxytyrosol and other polyphenol combination was much more potent than resveratrol, which is already recognized globally as a very potent antioxidant. Now, there are other biomarkers such as C-reactive protein. I don't know if any of you do preventive blood tests, for example, in your life, but I would always recommend that you include C-reactive protein, CRP. It's a biomarker of inflammation. It's reduced by hydroxytyrosol. Homocysteine is another cardiovascular risk biomarker of inflammation, and it is also significantly reduced by just taking hydroxytyrosol in the form of either aqueous extract, as I'll show you later, or even with regular consumption of extra virgin olive oil. Now, I mentioned free radicals. We don't like free radicals, right? What is a free radical? For those of you who don't know, I'd like to put it in simple terms. It's simply any atom or any molecule that is missing one electron in its outer shell. So here you see a free radical. It's missing an electron. And the antioxidant, all it is a molecular substance, such as hydroxytyrosol, such as resveratrol. It can donate that electron. It can say, hey, you're dangerous because you cause cancer, you're causing tissue damage. I'm going to give you one electron in that outer shell. Now you're not dangerous anymore. So now you might be asking, well, okay, hydroxytyrosol gave the electron. Why doesn't the hydroxytyrosol become dangerous? Because it's missing an electron. It's given one up. Well, it turns out that antioxidants have a special property. One, they can regenerate and recover that lost electron. But even in the state of being reduced, meaning giving up the electron, they are not dangerous by themselves. That's the distinction between an antioxidant and a free radical. It's very important. If we have too many free radicals, they overwhelm our body system for tissue recovery. It creates a condition which I'm going to repeat over and over in this talk. It's called oxidative stress. I'm sure many of you have heard of just out of curiosity, how many people have heard of oxidative stress? I'm just curious. Very good. It's a common term in medicine today because we can do blood tests today preventively to measure oxidative stress, and it's important because our level of oxidative stress determines our risk to get cardiovascular disease, cancer, and other degenerative diseases. Now, we can measure the antioxidant capacity of hydroxytyrosol. So the aqueous extract that I've been fortunate to work with is a very potent one. We can measure this in one test called ORAC, the oxygen radical absorbance capacity, the ability to get rid of free radicals, ORAC. It's not, by the way, it's not the most common method, I'll discuss that in a moment, to measure the antioxidant capacity, but it's very good in this case. And you can see that the olive aqueous extract that's primarily consisting of a hydroxytyrosol is 29,000. It's massive. It's the greatest antioxidant capacity in disease riddance that I've seen today, and that's why I'm working with that one. Now, it turns out that ABTS is a little more sensitive. It's another method to measure the antioxidant capacity of both olive oil and olive extract, because, for example, in many cases with just regular olive oil, you can see that the ORAC turns out to be immeasurable, zero. So that's why we've gone to other measures such as ABTS. But the key feature here is that the number one most potent antioxidant is hydroxytyrosol from olives. Another molecule that contributes heavily to oxidative stress is ROS, reactive oxygen species. I'm going to refer to that over and over today. I would just like to point out that what is an ROS? It's simply a chemically active molecule in our body that contains oxygen. So when they become overabundant in the body, they can also, like free radicals, produce tissue damage, and it's very important. So when we're faced with oxidative stress, it turns out to be more of an imbalanced situation. When we have free radicals and reactive oxygen stress that exceed the antioxidant capacity that we have in our body, they outweigh antioxidants and we get disease. It's quite a simple formula. It's not always measurable by a number or a blood test, but we can at least combat this situation against getting heart disease, anti-aging, cancer, diabetes. All we have to do is increase the amount of antioxidants that we take in. And that's where hydroxytyrosol plays a fantastic role, because it can actually tip the balance and one, becoming more voluminous in the body compared to ROS and free radicals, but two, it actually is, as I mentioned, it's an antioxidant. It diminishes both ROS and the quantity of free radicals in our body. So let's move on to the disease that most people ask me about. They always ask me about cancer. When I've been doing my checkups over the years, cancer is the primary concern. Let's face it, we are afraid of cancer for good reason, because cancer kills. Cancer is also common. Olive polyphenols are proven to kill cancer. We've taken such polyphenols as hydroxytyrosol, oleocanthal. We add them to human cultures of breast cancer, colon cancer, prostate cancer, pancreatic cancer, and we see an effect. Within 30 minutes, in some cases, there's direct cancer killing. This is powerful, and this is very hopeful for the future. But let's talk about how it kills, because people are asking me, okay, how do you take an olive molecule, drink it, put it on your salad, and kill cancer? It's not that simple, but if you have enough of the antioxidants in your body, it does kill. And there's three well-documented, scientifically proven mechanisms. First of all, I don't know if you've ever heard of this phenomenon called angiogenesis, but angiogenesis is important. It's the way that cancer hijacks our body's immune system so that we give it blood vessels to make it grow, to kill us. That's angiogenesis. And there's a direct effect. This is a cancer, this is a tumor being fed by blood vessels, and the addition of hydroxytyrosol to this situation actually kills and gets rid of the blood vessels and shrinks the tumor. And this is well known and well documented. This is angiogenesis. Secondly, the second effect is there's direct tumor necrosis. We affect various molecules called cytokines when we administer polyphenols from olives, and they induce direct cancer death, necrosis. And the third mechanism, we won't go into detail, it's called apoptosis. You probably saw recently there was a fantastic recipient of the Nobel Prize in Medicine from Japan talking about autophagy, about the natural history of cells, birth, growing, and dying. And apoptosis is the turnover phase, when the cell stops to live, whether it's a normal cell or a cancer cell. And polyphenols actually induce this apoptosis, the riddance of the cell from the body. So these are the three mechanisms, all scientifically proven. Now, the first one I mentioned was called angiogenesis. I'm actually on the board, scientific advisory board of the Angiogenesis Foundation, founded at Harvard University Medical School. And what we do at the Angiogenesis Foundation is we research foods that we can eat that beat cancer. Well, we've been doing this for 20 years, so it's not a new organization. We have great support in the scientific community, and we have great results. I invite you all, anybody interested, to look at angio.org to see all of the latest research, because not only are we talking about foods and food supplements, but the Angiogenesis Foundation has been instrumental in developing anti-angiogenic medications. Sometimes we need pharmaceuticals, and no less than the last 25 medicines have been co-developed with the help of the Angiogenesis Foundation. Now, this is angiogenesis. So we start with a few cancer cells in the body. It starts with 1, and then it goes to 2, 4, 8, and it gets to 1 million cells. But where did the blood system come from? When it was 1 cell, we weren't born with the cancer. There was no capillaries, there was no arteries, and no veins. So what happens is, this cancer, especially the malignant ones, does the following. It sends out vascular signals to the body, hormonal signals, and says, body, I need blood or I'm not going to grow. So we lend a circulatory system into the cancer, which allows it to grow and to spread, and eventually, hopefully not, but eventually that's what kills us, is angiogenesis. So this is the scenario. When the tumor makes these special signals, one of the most common one is called VEGF, vascular endothelial growth factor, VEGF. It's a very important one because when it produces VEGF, that's what tells the body, our body, to give it blood circulation to the cancer so that it grows. So one of the hot topics of preventive medicine today is to invent ways to destroy VEGF by natural means, such as hydroxytyrosol, oleocanthal, or by pharmaceuticals for cancers that are more well and strongly developed. So it turns out that olive polyphenols are extremely potent anti-angiogenics. They cut the activity of VEGF, and I'm going to show you just how that works. This, at the Angiogenesis Foundation, this is our model for cancer. These are human cancer cells, in this case breast cancer, that's growing on this ring. And all of these little hairs that you see in this micrograph are actually the blood vessels. These are the cancer blood vessels growing out of this medium, feeding the cancer. So let's do this. Let's take the breast cancer with its angiogenic blood vessels, and let's add to the solution hydroxytyrosol from olives. And then we wait a day. What happens? They're all gone. Why? Because hydroxytyrosol has cut the VEGF signal, it's cut the ability not only to develop new blood vessels, but it's killed the existing ones. So you see, angiogenesis lends great hope for the present and for the future, and that's why I'm extremely excited with the aqueous hydroxytyrosol product that I'm working with now, because it actually is already, on a clinical basis, I'm working with patients, is giving great promise. So this was a very important paper that was presented at the American Association of Cancer Research, the biggest body of new research, presented in New Orleans back in April of this year, by Dr. Albini and co-workers. And this was a fantastic work because Dr. Albini developed from olive meal waste water, not olive oil, an extract containing hydroxytyrosol, similar to the one I'm working with other polyphenols, because hydroxytyrosol alone, as Dr. Albini found, doesn't work. If you have pure hydroxytyrosol, you get an anti-cancer effect, but it's not as strong as if you add several other much weaker, but in tandem they work very well, polyphenols. So first, what she found, the higher the concentration of polyphenols, the stronger the effect, and the more varied the combination, the combination of hydroxytyrosol plus oleocanthal plus oleoperine and other derivatives, the more varied the combination, the greater effect against cancer. And this is actually the work from that publication that I refer you to. This is the model of angiogenesis, cancer angiogenesis that was implanted, these are human cancers by the way, implanted in immune system deprived mice, and they grew them, and then this redness reflects angiogenesis. It's the blood supply, it's hemoglobin inside this model of cancer. So they gave this mouse hydroxytyrosol injected, waited 4 days, and here's the cancer after the angiogenesis. 4 days later, you can see there is no angiogenesis because the hydroxytyrosol plus other polyphenols has effectively eradicated the blood supply, the lifeline to living for this cancer. So you can see it's a very potent model. Now, breast cancer. Breast cancer is probably the cancer that brings the most patients to me for questions, for diagnosis, for treatment. It's a common disease, breast cancer. It's an important one for women, of course. I'm sure most, if not all women in the audience are concerned about breast cancer. And this is a very interesting study. I refer you all to go online and read this. This is the PREDIMED study. PREDIMED was a very important study of thousands of individuals in Spain concerned with the Mediterranean diet. They studied men, they studied women, heart disease, cancer. But part of the PREDIMED study was they did the following. 4,282 women were given one whole bottle of extra virgin olive oil per week during 4 years. They had to drink this or eat it, or ingest it, one bottle a week. And it was confirmed by blood tests to make sure they had polyphenols in their system. And they did this for years, and then they determined how many of these women got breast cancer compared to the women that didn't take the extra virgin olive oil. It actually lowered breast cancer risk by 62%. So this is a very important finding because this was just giving extra virgin olive oil. So imagine the possibilities if we can come up with an extract, which is 50 times higher, 30 times higher content of hydroxytyrosol, the possibilities for breast cancer prevention are huge. Now, breast cancer is important. Polyphenols are important. But how many of you are concerned? How many people actually think in your daily regimen of lifestyle about cancer prevention? I mean, I'm just curious because many of my patients ask me, but doctor, I don't know what to do. Let me tell you one thing. You're sitting here now for 2 hours, so more or less. I would like you all to stand up. It's an exercise in cancer prevention because it's very instrumental. It won't be long. Please stand up. Now you're looking at this guy. What is Dr. Mc Namara doing? Why are you standing up? But I'll tell you, the number 2 cause of death from cancer is colon cancer. Did you know that? Number 1 is lung cancer, smoking. Smoking everywhere. I walk around Milano, I see cigarettes many places. And therefore, smoking for the longest time will be number 1. But number 2 is colon cancer. And you have just decreased your risk of colon cancer by standing up less than 2 hours by 8%. Do this. Set your watch every hour. If you're sedentary, if you're sitting in an office, sitting in front of a computer or television, you have to stand up because you've just now done a great service to yourself. You've decreased your risk by 8%. So while polyphenols are great, there are simple ways to always consider what you're doing as well. Okay, so please sit down. Thank you. I just wanted to make the point that there are ways to prevent cancer. Polyphenols are simple. Polyphenols work. But what I learned in medical school, my first year of medical school was simple things are the best. Okay, now you're worried about cancer, right? But I'm more worried about cardiovascular disease because cardiovascular disease is the number 1 risk that's going to kill most of the people in this room, by far. 50% of us in this room have at least one major risk factor for stroke and heart attack. 50%. It's a known fact. Major risk factor, genetics, high cholesterol, high blood pressure, maybe high blood sugar, poor biomarkers, excess reactive oxygen species. We don't know, but 50% of us. So we have to deal with that. And the polyphenols in the Mediterranean diet, published in 1998, the very first effect noted was it decreases cardiovascular disease. And it has known reasons. It makes your platelets less sticky. Your platelets don't stick together. You have less chance to make a blood clot that causes heart attack and stroke. It makes your blood vessels dilate. It improves circulation. It decreases inflammation. And it's antioxidant. These are the properties that make it prevent cardiovascular disease. And I'm going to show this to you now. Now, how do you prevent a heart attack? Well, you prevent a heart attack by, first of all, by getting rid of the risk factors, lowering your cholesterol, decreasing your blood pressure if it's elevated, keeping your blood sugar in check. But there are other ways that are very important, and I'm going to show these to you now. So, have you ever heard of a molecule called nitric oxide? I'm not sure if you've heard of it, but you should have. Nitric oxide was the 1992 molecule of the year. It was the recipient of the Nobel Prize in Medicine, 1998. 3 doctors, Dr. Furchgott from Australia, 2 colleagues, they won the Nobel Prize for discovering nitric oxide. And nitric oxide is a potent dilator of blood vessels. It opens up arteries, which is massive because if the arteries get too small, we get stroke, we get heart attack. But nitric oxide is produced by olive polyphenols. When we take this on a regular basis, we are improving our body's nitric oxide content. Here you see it. This is a regular diameter of a small capillary or arteriole. And after the intake of polyphenols, such as hydroxytyrosol, you see that the buildup of nitric oxide elevates within the wall because that's where it's produced. This lining of the blood vessel is called the endothelium. And the vascular endothelium is where we make nitric oxide. And that's the best place to have it because it relaxes the smooth muscle, this is the muscle lining. When you relax it, it gets bigger. And by the way, for those of you who said, yeah, I've heard of this nitric oxide, that's because it also causes dilation of blood vessels in specific areas, and that's how they invented this little blue pill called Viagra, and that's exactly how it works. So, very important concept, nitric oxide. Now, cholesterol. We're all concerned about cholesterol. It's a buzzword in medicine today. Some of us, probably, I'm sure there are people in this room taking statins, miracle-producing molecules, pharmaceuticals nonetheless, that lower cholesterol. But did you know that it's not really important? You don't want high cholesterol, but the key is not having really super low LDL, also known as bad cholesterol. The key is to not oxidize that cholesterol. You've all had people that, I get this every day, doctor, my uncle, my grandfather lived to be 99, he had super high cholesterol and he smoked. Why did he live to 99? It's because he didn't have a lot of inflammation and he wasn't oxidizing the LDL. The key is to prevent the conversion of this LDL bad cholesterol. And by the way, I refer you to these, I've showed you, as I mentioned, everything is peer-reviewed journal supported that I'm talking about. These are two amazing papers. I refer you all, I can give them to you later if you're interested, that you should read, that really prove that olive polyphenols decrease LDL cholesterol. It's a known fact. It's well documented. But to get back to the subject of LDL, this is very important because while we call LDL the bad cholesterol, it doesn't make this buildup of fat in the wall unless the LDL gets oxidized. Then it becomes the villain, and the villain is oxidized LDL-C. That's what contributes to the buildup of fat because the LDL finds its way into this cell called the macrophage. The macrophage accumulates lipid in the wall, makes a plaque, eventually blocks the blood flow when it becomes inflamed, causes a stroke and a heart attack. So the key is to prevent oxidation. And what's the best way? Taking an anti-inflammatory, taking an antioxidant, such as hydroxytyrosol. That's why the Mediterranean diet decreases the risk of heart attack. It's an antioxidant that prevents the oxidation, no matter what your level of LDL cholesterol is. Now, in addition to that, you've heard of good cholesterol, right? That's HDL. We have been so far fixated on elevating HDL. I'm guilty of the same. We want higher HDL. But you know what we just found, and the recent publication showed, HDL elevation isn't the answer. Sure, the more the better. What's the role of HDL? The role of HDL is to clear out the plaque when it's accumulated in our coronary arteries of the heart, when it's accumulated in our carotid arteries of the neck. We need to get this out. It's a reversible disease. If you have blocked arteries and you take polyphenols, you can reverse the disease. But it's not due to the elevation of HDL, it's due to the prevention of oxidation of HDL. So if you take hydroxytyrosol, it's scientifically proven to do the following. This is a busy slide. You don't have to know the details. What you have to know is just the 2 words at the bottom, 3 words. The efflux capacity. You're going to hear more and more about this. The HDL efflux capacity, EC. Because that's the capacity of good cholesterol HDL to clean out this plaque, to get rid of the fat already clogging our arteries, to get it out. It takes it to the liver, and the liver clears it from the body. It's fantastic, right? And it works. If you take on a daily basis polyphenols, hydroxytyrosol, you will increase your HDL efflux capacity, no matter what your age is. You know, this disease of arteriosclerosis, they've done autopsies, and unfortunate even 5-year-old children who have had car accidents, for example. And it's rare in our society today that a child at age 5 doesn't already have arteriosclerosis of the coronary arteries. It begins young. Our diet is bad, our air is polluted. When you're breathing air pollution, I know that in Milano it's a problem. Well, when the air quality index is high, you're breathing pollution. But did you know that, like cigarettes, that pollution goes into your blood system, makes inflammation. Inflammation makes heart disease, makes stroke, and it makes cancer. That's why we need the maximum amount of anti-inflammatory and antioxidants. Another paper, fantastic, decreases LDL concentration, olive polyphenols. And again, anybody that wants to know later, we can talk about this. Another risk factor for having cardiovascular disease is high blood pressure. We all know that. We don't want high blood pressure. By the way, we used to say that your blood pressure should be 140/90. Nice clean numbers. Well, look what it's been studied. They said, what happens if we make the limit more like 130/80? Well, they decrease heart attack risk by 50%. So your new limits are not 140/90. I know some of us are sitting on the border. Make it 130/80. You will live probably 10 years longer. But another way to lower your blood pressure, my first advice is always to lose weight. Anybody that has blood pressure, high blood sugar, I tell them lose weight because 75% of the time it's due to belly fat. But in the time interval that you're going to lose the weight, take olive polyphenols because that is going to lower. It's scientifically proven in this paper that it lowers blood pressure. In women that were studied, it lowered the systolic by 7 millimeters and the diastolic by 8 millimeters. That's a significant drop in blood pressure just from taking 25 milliliters a day of extra virgin olive oil. Now imagine if you take a concentrate of polyphenol, such as the one I'm researching now, you can get a 10-fold greater effect to lower blood pressure. Cigarettes, I mentioned that earlier. Cigarettes cause inflammation. If you can smell somebody's cigarette secondarily while you're walking in the street, while you're in a bar, while you're in wherever, you are dying. The moment you can smell, I don't want to be hypochondriac and I don't want to be radical in what I'm saying, but if you smell somebody else's smoke, that smoke's going into your system, it's getting into your lungs, blood system, it's making inflammation. It's making the disease that we're trying to fight against with these polyphenols. And I don't like to say this, but my patients that are smoking, they refuse to quit, the first thing I do is I put them on a concentrate of olive polyphenol. At least they can reduce their risk. It's scientifically studied that diseases such as chronic obstructive pulmonary disease and lung cancer, the risk is at least diminished by hydroxytyrosol. Now, let's take an example of a country like China, for example. China is 1.4 billion people, but 1 billion of these people either smoke or smell it. That's huge. These are diseases of inflammation. These are places in society where we can make a huge difference if we can get people to take a strong 5 minutes? Yeah, okay, I've got to go fast. Diabetes, another disease, very important. We can lower blood sugar by giving hydroxytyrosol. Scientifically proven, it lowers blood sugar. Now, diabetes is important. In the world, it's like a nation. 400 million people have diabetes, only 3 million in Italy. But in some countries like USA and China, it's epidemic. And 50% of the USA, for example, has diabetes or pre-diabetes. This is very important. So you can lower blood sugar by taking daily polyphenol. Obesity. Obesity is an epidemic. It's huge. 70% of the USA is obese or overweight. China is #1 in the world, where they used to be number 13 and 10 in the world 40 years ago. It's growing. And obesity is a disease of inflammation. Everything associated can be reduced, all the risk, by taking hydroxytyrosol. By tipping the balance in our favor, antioxidants they don't make you lose weight, but they reduce your risk for disease from obesity. And by the way, a study was done in that PREDIMED study. 187 men were studied for 3 years, given extra virgin olive oil alone, and the total antioxidant capacity correlated directly with weight loss. So the more all of polyhydroxytyrosol you take, the more you're going to naturally lose weight. Arthritis. Arthritis is common. I point you to a study called the Global Burden of Disease Study, published in June 2015 in The Lancet. They studied how many of us adults go to see a doctor. And you know what they found? 5% of us are healthy in the world. 95% of adults go to see a doctor once every year. And the number one reason, low back pain. The number two reason, arthritis. It's a common disease. It causes inflammation, and it's treatable with hydroxytyrosol because hydroxytyrosol gets rid of inflammation. It works in the same way as ibuprofen. It downregulates COX-2, which is an enzyme that causes this inflammation. And by getting rid of this COX-2, this is the molecule you see here, you can do that with simple olive polyphenols without the need of taking Voltaren, diclofenac, or ibuprofen. Anti-aging, very important. This is a proven science that olive polyphenols prevent aging. This is a telomere, the end of the chromosomes that determine how fast we're going to get old. And it's been studied and shown, for example, that there are longevity genes called SIR1, there's 7 of them. And 3 of the 7 anti-aging genes, SIR-T, are downregulated, decreased by hydroxytyrosol. This is true anti-aging. It's miraculous. Alzheimer's disease, another inflammatory disease. Did you know that it's caused by the accumulation of beta amyloid protein in the brain? And now we have scientific proof that if you take hydroxytyrosol on a regular basis, it clears this from the brain. Remains to be seen what's going to happen to the clinical symptoms, but at least we have hope that this can, I think it will be a great preventer of all dementia, but especially Alzheimer's disease, just the daily consumption of hydroxytyrosol. Exercise, the last subject I'm going to talk about. Exercise, high intensity exercise produces a huge amount of free radicals, which leads to injury and decreased performance. We are testing world-class athletes now with an extract of polyphenol that I'm going to talk about in just a moment, and we're getting fantastic results. And we not only improve performance, we decrease the amount of muscle injury they get from these free radicals. Now let's skip this because I have to finish. The olive extract that I'm using is actually available downstairs. I'm not commercially tied, but I thank them because they provide me with this amazing formula of hydroxytyrosol plus other polyphenols that I'm actually researching. And the reason I work with this one, because this is the only one that's accepted. They're working with at Harvard University in Boston with the Angiogenesis Foundation to prove its worthiness to decrease cancer, to work in anti-aging, and to prevent cardiovascular disease. So I push all of you to consider the fact that we have common diseases today. 70% of us are going to die from heart attack, stroke, and cancer. It's a known fact. But every stroke, every heart attack is 100% preventable. And there are many ways. Of course, exercise, watch your diet, but you should all be taking antioxidants in the form of polyphenol, in some type of olive polyphenol, such as hydroxytyrosol. I don't go a day without taking it twice, to be honest. I'm not a hypochondriac, but it works. And by the way, I just showed this slide. The European Food Safety Authority officially recognizes that the olive polyphenols prevent deadly LDL cholesterol. This is an official edict by the EFSA. So you see, it's not just me speaking. Official agencies of our health today have determined that these diseases can be prevented by this simple carbon ring structure with 2 oxygens hanging off of it, hydroxytyrosol. It looks simple, it is simple, but as in everything in preventive health, the first thing is to be aware, and second is to act. So thank you very much for your attention.
Grazie, grazie, grazie.
Yes.
Avete visto che al di là di questo è per te?
Thank you, grazie.
The present.
Wow.
Avete visto come queste sostanze rendano snelli, giovani, in perfetta forma, lucidi, e questi prodotti, anche questi, le sostanze a base di idrossitirosolo e di ponifenoli di cui avete imparato l'importanza, li trovate giù appena uscite in sala sponsor da Montevibiano, che tra l'altro si stanno impegnando tantissimo proprio per combattere i tumori, e hanno avuto anche delle eccezionali come dire, risposte. Quindi,